Oh boy, 3 Mark Tomes! 3 Mark Tomes, I guess. Welcome back to the Mentor Roulette grind. I was really hoping to do some more DPS roulettes, but unfortunately the queue time was very long this time, so I ended up going as a healer, and mainly scholar. Still, we had an interesting spread of experiences this time, although the kind of spread we got looks more like what I expected to get last week, with the amount of Mark Tome relevant duties I landed in. With that said, for duty 1 we went to the Guildhest Shadow and Claw, which is very difficult as you can see. For duty 2 we went to Matoya's Relict. Did you know that Warrior can solo Matoya's Relict synced? Honestly, that's probably not much of a surprise given the difficulty of the duty itself. Anyway, on the first boss it seems the summoner just did not get the mudball rolling mechanic. I assume they accidentally dealt with it the first time, because the second time, they kind of got rolled by it. On the final boss, I couldn't remember whether this knockback mechanic could be blocked with Surecast, so I decided to test for the sake of it. Unfortunately, it seems the summoner assumed it would be fine to stand with me. Spoiler alert, it was not fine. And then in this part where you have to run away from the Porksy, I guess the bard suddenly got overwhelmed? I didn't even see how they ended up there. With all that said, a quite silly detail about this fight is that this intermission with the tornado does not really punish you for not killing the tornado in time. When the Porksy finally comes down, you get just enough time to move into position anyway. And even if you don't, it doesn't kill you in one shot, so failing this DPS check is totally fine. For duty 3, we land in Porta Decumana, which due to the Mark Tome event does mean some free bonus Mark Tomes from me on the side. Did you know that Art of War is a gain on 1 at level 50? Something that is interesting about this fight is that the AoE damage that comes out is just enough that if the party doesn't take unnecessary damage, you can just barely keep up with it with just abilities as a scholar. You just need to be very efficient with your resources and make sure most of the healing of the abilities properly land. The only particular outstanding thing about this group, if I could even call it outstanding, is that not a single limit break was used, not even the limit break 3 at the end. For duty 4, we went to Mhigo with what appears to be possibly 3 first-timers. Over the course of the dungeon, I got the impression the tank pulled somewhat safely. At most 2 packs at a time, which is a good approach if you don't know the duty. At the very start it was just 1 pack at a time though, which gave me a lot of space to check their approach to defensive cooldowns, notably Raw Intuition. I carefully let them drop lower and lower to see how low they had to go before Raw Intuition would be used on this pack that was safe enough that I could deal with it in case they never used Raw Intuition. But it seems that around 20% was the magic number. Now that I knew this, I would intentionally not heal until Raw Intuition came into play, after which I would heal until Raw Intuition would be back up again. The thing is, I knew this could become a problem already, but bringing it up could just make things worse, so I just stuck to my strategy quietly. The problem, in particular, is with letting your HP drop super low in a duty where you aren't well acquainted with the mobs, and more importantly, not adjusting your strategy to the pack you're fighting. What I mean by that is that after the first boss, the tank did a 2-pack pull here, and some of you may recognize that these gorilla boys are very scary in a way. They regularly smack with a no-warning tank buster. We even see these tank busters land, which should have given the tank the warning sign that they should be careful. However, at exactly this point, I realize that if the tank does not understand the danger, they will die without my intervention. Despite this, I decide to let them get the chance to do their thing, but indeed, the double tank buster came out and the tank went down too fast for me to do anything after the fact. I apologized and explained what I expected to happen, I was waiting for Raw Intuition, and for the rest of the duty, the tank seemed to use Raw Intuition when they were at half HP instead of near death, making everything much safer. The best explanation of how to do things is a practical demonstration at times, I suppose. By the way, Did you know that Warrior can solo Mhigo synced? Yes, even with the DPS check on Xenos at the end. For Duty 5, we went to Porta Decumana again, which started with a brief oops, no tank stand situation, and a brief talk about the inconvenience of it turning off. I guess the reason tank stand turns off like that is maybe because back in the day, getting synced down to a lower level dungeon could absolutely land you on a duty with no tank stands. As before Shadowbringers, tank stances were level 30. Yes, that's right. In Sastasha, you held aggro with combo steps with boosted enmity generation, or alternatively just crashed and burned. Gladiator also had flash for reliable AoE enmity. In this group though, we did have limit breaks like expected. For Duty 6, we went to Doma Castle, and I guess the ninja was a first timer? Not that it really matters. Anyway, the warrior had some kind of strange pulling tendencies, sort of. Like they sometimes sat on a pack for weirdly long before moving on. Other times they would move on and then eventually just change their mind. They also had some weird timings with raw intuition. Despite both of these things, it wasn't like it was a big deal. We still cleared the duty just fine. It is also understandable some of the points the tank changed their mind on, like with the turrets that shoot telegraphs out ahead of you. But there was this point where the tank tried really hard to push onward up the broken staircase, which I did find amusing. Oh yeah, also, did you know Warrior can solo Doma Castle synced? The hardest boss is actually the second one. For Duty 7, we went to the Aery, where I randomly decided to go as White Mage instead. Now, the tank and the samurai were perfectly fine players and did well. However, the Black Mage... legitimately, I have no idea what was going through their mind. On the first boss, I noticed they were running a classic Only Fire 3 and Blizzard 3 style, which did not do very much damage. So I tried to give them some pointers, but they did not react. In fact, they got worse. I tried again at the second boss with no reaction either. With that said, this Black Mage covered many of the worst Black Mage rotations throughout the duty. Balance Mage, Ice Mage, only 3s, and also sometimes just randomly cast stuff. Like, I really don't know what was going on, but I do genuinely guess they were just using spells almost entirely at random. At least, it seemed they didn't go completely into Fire Mage territory. Still, oh dear, I sure hope they upgrade beyond Twitch Plays Black Mage. For Duty 8, we went to Bardam's Mettle. Rather early in the duty, I noticed that it felt quite challenging compared to what I'm used to keep the Paladin alive. But then again, I don't get Paladin tanks in Bardam's Mettle very much, so I spent quite a lot of the duty watching over the Paladin to see if it was a Paladin thing, a gear thing, or a cooldown thing. It also turned out the Paladin knew me. By the last big pull in the dungeon, I noticed for certain that large portions of the fight they had no defensive cooldown running, which made things harder, so I gave them advice about this. After the final boss, I also clarified that this concept, known as defensive cooldown cycling, is mainly for AoE pulls. Although, if you have defensive cooldowns just sitting there that you won't need, then it is free damage reduction, and that saves you healing. After the duty, they also followed up on the Discord community server, link in the description, so I gave them some more advice, but this one was off camera. Anyway, aside from these things, overall, the duty went fine. A big reason why it took so long to give advice was because everything was manageable, so I didn't feel like necessarily there was a need to change anything. It was simply more challenging than usual. In this level range, Paladin is also still a bit awkward with no self-healing options aside from Clemency, which is really the standout thing when compared to the other tanks. Oh, and finally, did you know that Warrior can solo Bardam's Mettle synced? The mega pulls at the start are problematic, but aside from that, no issues. For Duty 9, more Guildhest, with this super weird Annoy the Void. It is a bit hard to figure out exactly what matters in this fight, but it appears that the blue flames just make the boss hit harder, but I can't really see how much the damage is being increased, because it hardly did damage in the first place? Looking at the buff, it also feels like the flames don't stack, so with the sheer amount of flames that appear throughout the fight, it feels kind of pointless to put them out. Just kill the boss, then deal with the adds afterwards, which is also kind of weird. And finally for duty 10, Voidcast Dais with, from what I can see, 6 or even 7 first-timers. It was quite a doozy, and I think the best way to experience it is if we take it play by play. Also, before we start, I just want to highlight that the warrior specifically said they were a first-timer among many others. But keep track of this warrior throughout, right? The fight starts with the Terror Storm that is easily avoided, followed by Blade, which has very little warning, so hopefully everyone learns to see it coming throughout the fight, right? Then we have the Rime-Kissed Blades, and yet another Blade Cleave. Do people see it coming this time? Not yet. Then comes the Tank Busters, which actually hurt quite a bit for a normal trial, by which I mean, wow! After that, we have the Lingering Sparks. Did you know that the extreme version of this mechanic basically just hides the telegraphs? And this is where our first death comes. Right into another Blade Cleave, where only one person got hit this time. A Raid Wight comes in after that, so all those vulnerability stacks that have built up really is going to hurt now. The unfortunate part about the group mostly having learned the Blade Cleave mechanic is that from this point forward, Golbiz adds something more to it.
With abyssal dark and hero's blade, I bring my people liberation.
The sheer amount of time to plan before Black Fang lands makes it easy to deal with. So, with that said, this Ajdai's Shadow mechanic essentially adds a circle AoE under Golbiz just about a second after the Blade Cleave, with no telegraph. On Extreme, it can be either a donut or a circle, but here, it seems to always consistently be the circle. Because of this, the cast itself is used to warn you on Extreme of what is coming up. But on Normal, it just is like, there, I suppose? Immediately after, the Blade Cleave comes with a new name. And we have our second death to getting triple tapped, unfortunately. And this leads straight into the double meteors mechanic. For those unsure, the knockback always centers on a healer, and that healer is best placed in the center of the arena, so everyone can get pushed to their chosen marker. We only need 4 players to land correctly on normal though. An unfortunate raise timing leads to the red mage just getting dunked right back down again from a knockback the raise invuln does not protect you from. Now, we get 1 vuln stack and a lot of damage from a missed meteor stack, which leads into a double kill and nearly a triple kill. This is still manageable though. Next up, Gale Spheres, which is rather easy when nothing else happens. However, Void Stardust is weirdly a lot scarier on normal relative to the other mechanics that happen. Another double kill leading into the next Tank Buster set, which is simply too much with 4 vuln stacks, so we are down to 2 healers and a tank. My co-healer starts to hardcast Raise to try and recover, which is a good idea. I can handle the healing alone just fine. The real problem is precisely this Eventide 4 line stack pair with 4 players alive. As long as we stay focused, something like Gale Spheres is almost free break time. The Blade Cleave right after, less so. Even worse that it is accompanied by a stack marker that, again, we're a bit low on players for. And before we can fully recover, we're back to the second Void Stardust, the mechanic that originally got us down to this low head count. And now it feels like Golbiz decided to just loop his mechanics. At over 50% HP, that is concerning. Right into another Blade Cleave, into another double meteor, where again 1 fails, leading us to 1 healer, 2 tanks alive. What do we do now? 1. Stabilize. 2. Look for an opening. 3. Healer limit break. Unfortunately, healer limit break does not cure vuln stacks, but now we're finally all alive for the double line stacks. Here's a rather silly part. To try and help, I put a marker on me for the Gale mechanic, which ironically distracted me just enough that I got confused as to which Gale resolved first. However, the marker was also intended to indicate where to go after the Blade Cleave right after, which leads us back down to 6 players. At this moment, I decide to explain this circle thing in case it isn't clear, because it is somewhat subtle. Void Stardust number 3 comes out, but this time, everyone lived. Never mind. And yet another Blade Cleave takes us down to 6 again, with the double meteor getting us all the way down to 4. 1/3 HP left on the boss. By the way, you might be looking at this and wonder why we keep raising the red mage first, despite despite them having such a hard time with the fight. Simply, the race is too helpful to ignore. The summoner comes second and sometimes first, but the DPS without a raise are always dead last, unfortunately. Once again, we have everyone alive for the double line stacks, and this time the Blade Cleave only got us down to 7. We're making progress. Void Stardust number 4 comes out, and the next Blade Cleave gets us back down to 6, of course. And now finally it is my turn to be the knockback center on the meteors. Down to 5 again. I see that the red mage is really beating themselves up over this, so I try to give them some motivating words. Everyone's alive for the line stacks again, and here comes Monk Limit Break 3. Remember when we used Healer Limit Break? Oh, how young we were. And right to the end, everyone stood tall. First try. So easy, am I right, everyone? Nearly 15 minutes of goal-based combat. I do have to say that while getting an extreme with a lot of competent, solid players wanting to win and doing it is fun, getting a group of first-timers of varying skill levels on an okay challenging regular difficulty fight is often a lot more exciting since there is almost always a chance to recover. Unfortunately, it is very difficult to find these fights naturally. Now, that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to support me and my channel more directly, you can become a member like these wonderful people here. You can also alternatively support me through Ko-Fi, link in the description. You can also support the channel by letting the YouTube algorithm know by liking the video, leaving a comment, subscribing, sharing, and hitting the bell to get notified when next I post a video. Fun fact, Twitch Plays Things usually involves a stream setup with the ability for the chat to influence what the character on screen does with comments, like saying up to run upwards or forward. Most of the time, this devolves into total chaos, and there have been cases when actual randomizer did better than the chaos of a chat controlling the character. I guess partly because the semi-controlled chaos of a chat of actual people can be consistent in its chaos, but that may not mean it's any good. Like randomly choosing to perform the Balance Mage, or suddenly casting Fire 1 repeatedly. There's also the possibility of, trolls in the chat intentionally choosing detrimental choices.